And thank you for your patience. Finance. I'm not going to do law. And what I'm going to do here is more of an update. I'm sure that when most of us watch the news, sometimes we get confused of what is happening around the world in terms of bank crisis. There are a couple of banks that have collapsed. And tonight I want to look at some of the challenges that people may go through in terms of those who have savings, even those who are living in houses, even those who are paying rent, some of the challenges that we are likely to face. I wish to say that what I'm doing here is an update. If you want to obviously make an investment or consider downsizing your portfolio of investment, and I urge you to seek proper professional legal or financial advice on it. But I'm here to give you update generally for people to understand what is happening around us. So tonight I'm not doing an immigration, and I'm going to look at finance by looking at the bank crisis and look at some of the effects and what challenges the UK economy is currently going through. So, if you are watching me tonight, I want you to share the videos, let people also benefit, so you can invite a friend to invite a friend. And obviously this is where we always keep this legal hour show and make sure that people are abreast, they're up to date with what is happening in terms of current affairs, in terms of the law. And we do this in English every Tuesday, and obviously on Wednesday, we have this famous MC Chaka who sits on this show as a host and then take us through the Tree version. So everything that I'm doing here tonight, you can watch it in the Tree, or you can listen to it in Tree tomorrow evening, which I hope I'll be here. So guys, I'm urging you to share this video, because I'm looking at something that is quite significant, affects most of us. Obviously, even if you don't have savings, you live in a house. And when interest rate goes up, it affects everything. Because if it affects your rent, it affects the groceries, and especially when inflation is also combined with a high interest rate, then most of us have to then tighten our belt. These are basic stuff that obviously those of you who might not have had the benefit of learning finance will be able to understand it as part of this free legal hour show. You can watch this program on Facebook, CITI Media TV. On Facebook, we have 3 main channels. We have CITI Media TV, we have Thomas Weber, my own personal profile on Facebook. We also have the CITI Law Solicitors Facebook page. You can watch it there. YouTube, you can watch it there, CITI Law Solicitors YouTube channel. And then you can also listen to the radio, CITI Media Radio. So I'm going to take my time. I will not be long here tonight. This is a very short topic, but it's so important that people do understand it. And of course, as I always do, I'm going to go on a short commercial break to make sure that viewers get a link, and I want you to do the same as I go on this short commercial break. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for your patience. So as I've said earlier, tonight I'm just simply looking at bank crisis, and we are in 2023. I remember that we had what they call the financial crisis in 2008, and by then a lot of people had their houses repossessed because houses were overvalued and banks were struggling to keep up because of what they call securitization. But I'm not here to bore you with my finance knowledge. Today I'm just looking at bank crisis and how this may affect your investment portfolio. You may have savings, you may have a house, you may be paying a rent, you probably a consumer because you buy cars, you buy food. So whenever there is likelihood of this crisis, then it affects all of us, whether rich or poor. We tend to suffer the consequence. So I'm going to give a background slightly to what is happening around us. And obviously I'll look at some few things. As I said, this is an update of the bank crisis. Now, so you realize that in economics we have what they call cyclical or drought, where the economy obviously progresses and it gets to a stage where there is a little bit of depression, and then you find out that people tend to suffer, they lose some investments and all that. And in 2008, due to overvaluation and securitization, bank collapses, Lehman Brothers collapse, and then it affected most of these banks. And then there was what they call global financial crisis. Now recently, if you watch the news, you realize that the California Silicon Valley Bank has collapsed. We have the Credit Suisse, which has also collapsed in Switzerland. So you realize that a couple of banks are collapsing, not necessarily in the UK. But tonight I'm going to look at what is happening in the UK. Those of you who will be following this finance, you find out that UK banks are quite resilient because of the effects of the financial crisis in 2008. Therefore, they have quite a buffer, more than 2% to cover. So normally, because of all these things that is happening, they are quite unpredictable and they move quite swiftly. Because when banks are interdependent on each other, so if a bank in California, Silicon Valley is collapsing, or Credit Suisse is collapsing, and some of these banks could be affected, and that's what they call bank crisis. And when these crises begin to happen, then they are going to have effect on certain things. And these are things that some people have put their money into it. And that I will call the investment portfolio, because some people may invest in shares. Some may invest by putting their money, sticking in the bank as savings, and then they get interest on it. Some will invest in houses by buying houses and paying mortgages on it. Some will even invest in shares that they get dividends, which are paid out to them end of the financial year, out of the profit the business has made. I'm going to take my time to explain some of these things, obviously. So tonight I'm looking at the challenges that are happening around us and how you can position yourself as somebody who has any of these portfolios, in the sense that if it turns out that things get worse, then most of these investments can be affected, where people may lose money, just as when we had the global financial crisis in 2008. A lot of people lost their houses, and most people have to abandon their house because the mortgage was so high, and the house was overvalued. So you find out that the value of the house was far, far less than the amount of mortgage that was sitting there for one to pay. And so what they do is that they just do a runoff and leave the house or the bank to take over foreclosure. And the banks, in the end, because they've also borrowed money to give out this mortgage, then they also tend to collapse because they are not receiving the revenue to be able to service some of these monies that has been securitized on these mortgages. So you find out that this is how some of these things happen. Right, so tonight, I'm looking at this in the context of what is happening, and I'll look at it. I'm going to look at first the housing sector, and then obviously I'll look at shares, dividends, and savings. But I think it's most important that I also look at savings. So normally, those of you who will want to put all your money in savings, and you want to enjoy the fact that each time you open your account, you have all this money lying in your account. So it gives you joy that you have so much money in your savings account. And also the fact that some people, they say they are risk averse, which is that they want to invest in something that in the end, what will happen is that they tend to lose money. If, for example, they have money in shares or into maybe houses and all that. So they have this money sitting in their account. Some people have about 300,000 pounds, maybe waiting to buy a house. The money is sitting there in the account. I want you to know that normally under the UK law, if you have money into your account and the bank collapses, you are covered to up to 85,000 pounds. And therefore, if it's above 85,000 pounds, then you are likely to be alarmed. Because when you have California Silicon Valley, you have Credit Suisse and all these banks collapsing, then there is a likelihood that what we experienced in the financial crisis in 2008, though quite unpredictable, may be likelihood. And therefore, if you have savings, maybe you may have to look at whether or not it's wise keeping more than 85,000 in your saving account, or probably spreading it by investing in something else, so that if there is a collapse, it doesn't wipe out your savings. So that's my first point. My second point is that generally you find out that interest rate is so high, inflation is so high, and therefore you realize that within the housing market, at this particular time, it is so good for the banks because they are lending money and they are getting huge returns. So you realize that most of the banks are making a lot of profit because the interest rate has gone up, and most of us are into debt because we have put most of our money into mortgages by buying houses and secured mortgages on those houses. And therefore, if the interest is high, it means that lending has become profitable to these banks. But the danger is that, and here this is where a little bit of economics comes in, the danger is that if the lending has become so profitable, it helps the banks to make a lot of profit, and therefore it stabilizes the banks. But the danger is that as lending is becoming quite expensive, which is interest rate being so high, then most people who want to buy a house, I have a friend who wants to buy a house, he keeps asking, Thomas, do you think it's the right time to buy? Because the interest rate is so high. So you realize that there are many more people who want to buy houses, and then they tend to hold off because they feel that the interest rate is so high at this point. So they are holding off from purchasing. Now, so if a lot of people are holding off purchasing, it means that there is less demand for houses. People who want to buy houses, they are sitting on their money because the interest rate is so high. And therefore, because the interest rate is so high and they are sitting on their money and they don't want to buy these houses, in a basic economics, we find out that it means there is a less demand and more supply. So it means that people who want to sell their houses, or because they are struggling to pay this mortgage, some people have friends who want to move in with their parents because they feel that if they can rent out their houses or their houses where they are currently living alone in it, then they can save some money because the interest rate has gone up so high. For those who feel that there is a risk, if they can't pay, they can repossess those houses, they may want to sell or downsize. So some people who are living in big houses may want to sell and then try and go and buy a house in a place which is slightly cheaper or even a smaller house. So you find out that you have a lot of people trying to sell, but people who want to buy because they are holding off because of the high interest rate. So you have more supply, less demand. And then within that context, you find out that the prices currently, last time I read the Financial Times, it was clear from predictions that mortgage house prices are likely to fall by 10% 2023 alone. So you find out this fall obviously affects the value of these houses, especially those who have secured mortgage at this high rate. So it means that eventually these banks who have secured these mortgages on these houses, whose prices are now falling, then means that the value of the house is becoming far less than the mortgage on that house. So there is this risk, this danger of us falling into the 2008 crisis, which we all suffered so much consequences, people becoming homeless because of the fact that they couldn't pay their mortgages and the houses were taken out from them. So tonight I'm looking at all this because I'm trying to conscientize people. Most times we take some of these things for granted. So that's quite brief about the housing aspect of this high interest rates and bank crisis that is happening around us. But the good news is that the UK banks are quite resilient. And because of the effect of the financial crisis and the fact that there was new legislations for banks to increase most of their deposit. So it means that even when there is likely to be crisis, there is a buffer of funds to cover most of these shocks by the banks. So it's not all gloom and doom. But moving further from this point, I know I'm quite technical because it's a little bit of finance and economics in what I'm discussing. Someone will ask me, lawyer, is this law? Yes, it's law. I always say that there is law anytime you are making a choice. It's the legal choice. Because even for you to understand the fact that entering into a mortgage by not understanding the legislation of how your house can be taken away from you if you're unable to pay, it's law. And interest rates going up and you not being, it's all law. And therefore, even though I may describe this as finance, but it's still part of the law. That's why I'm trying to educate a lot of people on this legal hour show tonight. So having described savings, I have talked about savings and the risks that if you have more than £85,000 sitting in your bank and there is a collapse, then you may be covered for up to that 85,000. So those of you who have all these huge funds sitting in your savings account, you probably have to look at whether or not you have to spread it across or even invest in some funds. I've spoken about houses, how the likelihood of house prices falling by 10% by 2023, end of 2023, and the mechanisms, the dynamics leading to those falls I've also explained it. So, the other point is that you find out that as these banks begin to experience few problems here and there, and house prices are falling, which are linked to all these mortgages, then you find out that banks also raise money by sometimes shares, through shares. When I say shares, where people float shares onto the market and people buy them, and once they bought them, as those companies or businesses are making profit because they have invested in them, they get what they call dividend. So the more profit they are making here, then at the end of the year, whatever they give to them as part of their share of that profit is what people will normally call dividend. So you have these dynamics of shares falling, and therefore likelihood that people obviously who one may want to sell their shares are not going to make profit because the shares are falling. And the businesses who are also struggling, and that's why their shares are also falling, means that they'll be unable to pay you more dividends, so you get dividend also falling. So you find out that when there is bank crisis, we have investment portfolios such as houses, people who have invested in it, savings, shares being affected. So coming to the end of my discussion, which is my topic for tonight, do I have to worry about my investment portfolio or my house? But before I do that, let me acknowledge few people who have joined us. I know that this is quite a unique area and most people may not be that interested. So I have Nancy Nkoli. Nkoli is always on this show. Nkoli, we can't wait to have you back again. Thank you so much for joining. I have Sophia Asong, who is always here. I know I may be boring most of you with all my economic and finance jargons, but please bear with me. I want to bring some dynamics to this platform. I have Lydia Odro. Lydia Odro, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I have Karek Felmon. This is Karek Felmon. Thank you so much. You've been quite a regular member for some time now. Thank you. I have Richie Dusuarez. I'm watching you, lawyer from Stevenage. Richie Dusuarez, thank you so much for joining us. Karim. I have Karim watching tonight. Karim, thank you so much. Tonight, you see, I'm not speaking Twi. Last time you were accusing me of speaking Twi and sharing links to people. Tonight, I'm speaking English because we do the English on Tuesdays, and then we do the Twi Wednesdays. So guys, tonight I have the privilege to discuss some of these dynamics. And obviously, I'm sure that with what I have discussed here, especially those of us who may want to keep our money sitting in the bank, with more than 85,000, they have to be careful because of the fact that we now have California Silicon Valley Bank collapsing, we have Credit Suisse collapsing, and we all know how this financial crisis started in 2008 when Lehman Brothers collapsed, and then eventually we have Northern Rock Bank in the UK collapsing, and banks started struggling, and eventually we have this global financial crisis. So whenever we hear banks collapsing, even if they are not collapsing in the UK, then there's an alarm bell ringing that we have to be cautious. And it's for this reason that I've taken my time tonight to try to elaborate and explain the dynamics and what may happen to people's investment. But obviously, someone will say that, well, I don't own a house, I don't have even these savings, I don't even perhaps even have any shares, and I don't even know what you are talking about. But obviously, you might also be renting. And therefore, as these interest rates are going up and people are struggling, landlords may also want to increase their rents. And if these houses are being repossessed, then most people are also going to be evicted. So it is of interest to all of us. And we saw what happened when the landlord has left the house and run away because he could not service the mortgage. And then the banks engage in foreclosure. And then they get these tenants evicted, property put back on auction for sale. So I'm not saying that it's all gloom and doom, but I'm just saying that people have to be cautious, and I'm just giving legal update tonight, and which is the topic for tonight that I've just explained to viewers. Thank you all for joining me tonight. On Wednesday, I'm going to take my time to explain the same thing in Chi, and obviously next week I'll come my way with another topic. Thank you. God bless you.